probably familiar. In 2009, we started a series of articles in the magazine called Why We Write. That's basically a series of personal essays by writers from all walks of life, some who've been published, some who have not. And, basically just talking about what brought them to writing, what keeps them going, and why it is why they do what they do, why we do what we do. So I'm very happy today to bring that series to life. And I'm here with 5 excellent writers, and they're here to talk about why they do what they do.
The idea of becoming a writer, I would say it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I felt comfortable even writing that on forms that you have to fill out for a visa. You're not a writer, you are a person who has written a book or 2 books or 3 books, and maybe you'll write another one. It's not something that you get to be forever.
Come back to the United States, I don't know any English, I don't know anything about the culture, and so I lose language for a long, long time. I'm kind of silent. And it's because I kind of teach myself to read, and it's really through reading that I come to writing.
I think for me, writing was always a suitable place to be irresponsible and to say things that I probably wouldn't say face-to-face to people. I think it's important to show up all the time if you are indeed a writer. And a lot of us would much rather do a lot of other things. I know I would. And yet I find myself writing out of habit, curiosity, and also that sense of wanting to break into a conversation in a way which is disruptive and forbidden and transgressive.
My discipline has never been very constant, but I'm very fortunate that when I do sit down, I can produce a lot of text. I don't have a very strong editor when I'm writing, so I can just kind of barf a bunch out and then kind of clean it up later, which I highly recommend. I feel like it served me well. When I was younger, I started writing, really fervently in my 20s, and it really just gave my life purpose. It was really easy to sit down and do it because I drank and smoked while I did it, so that was fun. And then I just kind of I felt like I had found this really special, cool thing that was giving my life this meaning.
We write all the time. We're writing in our heads when we're walking, and we're writing when we're in conversation with others. We catch ourselves saying things. We catch ourselves writing things and messages to friends. And it's really just your job to sort of collect the best parts of that, if you can learn to recognize them, and begin to, create out of that natural tendency that you have already to be a writer inside. You just have to turn that outside. And I feel like it's important to be productive and to just put things into notebooks and not to decide whether they're good or bad, but just to keep, assembling your language. Something will come from it.
I think that discipline to write every day, if possible, right, is super important for the writer in terms of kind of like a pianist, concert pianist, right, has to practice 6-7 hours every day just to keep up with their chops, right? Same thing with the writer, I think. They have to constantly be doing that, and that's a part of the consistency, yes, that you are consistent in it, whether it's every Saturday or every Friday or at night or in the morning, whatever it is, so that your body and your mind is kind of ready for it.
I learned my discipline from being a scientist. If you're a scientist, you have to go to a lab every day. If an experiment fails, you have to do it again. There's no excuse to wait for inspiration. So for me, I write fiction, so the desire to be with my characters. And I think part of it is because I feel that I'm a very boring person and my characters are so interesting. And so every day I can't wait for my children to go to school so I can spend some time with them. So that helps too. You have to find something. in your characters, and I really like to spend time with them.
And I would not say I enjoy writing. Robert Pinsky once said he enjoyed having written, and that's how I feel. At the end of a writing day, I feel great. And if I don't write on the Tuesdays and Thursdays I've set aside, I feel terrible. I read a lot of mysteries, and I think of it the way they always describe the serial killer's feeling. You know, the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up, and then he has to do it, and then he feels great after. So that's how my writing day is. The moments when I'm blocked, there's a reason for it. I am missing a piece of information or an insight or something that will come along to me, and it always has. If I wait a few days, usually, miraculously, something in my life will turn up this missing piece of information, and I'll be able to go on. So
You would read Chekhov's letters. Letter after letter after letter, he would talk about this novel he was working on. We never saw it. He said it was going to be a 5-part novel. It was like a wheel, like 5 spokes of wheel. I mean, he described everything, and he never wrote it. And I found that very comforting.
When there is no, how can I say, animo, no sense of spirit for writing that particular morning, but you got, the writing still needs to be done. So what I do is I reach into some really nice writer that I admire, and I think one of the truisms of good writing and a good writer is that when you read them, you want to do it.
I feel like those silences, those moments when we think we're not writing, are really us figuring things out. It's like, where's the next flower that I might light upon and actually draw something? It doesn't mean that any of the other thinking is wrong-headed. It means that oftentimes we have ideas that lead nowhere, and we should celebrate that.
I come from like a family of people who are like nurses, and they went and they got their training, and you probably relate to this like as a scientist, Yiyun, but like they have worked as a nurse for 40 years, and they're like, I'm a good nurse. Like I've been doing this for 40 years, and I am an awesome nurse. And I'm like, I could be doing this for 40 more years, and I'll never feel like I'm a great writer. I know how to write a book. Like you think you would learn. I've written books. I sit down to write a new one, and I'm baffled. How did I do the last one? I have no idea, no confidence.
I find that I'm always relieved when I rewrite something and see how really things that were not terribly difficult make all the difference between an incredibly stupid first draft and a much less stupid one. It's really a lot easier to eliminate the stupidities than it is to get the first draft out, I find. And you can see them. You can see what's wrong, and you can cut things. You can think up smart sentences as transitions. You can do all sorts of things that make something that actually was 90% there, but you didn't feel it because it had 10% stupidity. You can make it fine.
The part of my brain that is creative and writes creatively, and the part of my brain that has more of that eagle eye for editing are 2 different parts of my brain. And when I try to have them going at the same time, I'm just running in place and I'm not moving forward.
I agree with Michelle. For me, it's way too difficult to be editing and writing. It's better for me to just do the writing, as bad as it might be. But then what I find is that as I get closer to the end, I feel better and better about it because I've taken away all the bad stuff. And then when I leave just the good stuff, it allows me to expand the good stuff, yeah? And then I might shrink it a little bit and expand it and shrink it until the last version should be like a dwarf star, you know? One spoonful weighing 3 tons.
I think very much about structure before I write a book. And structure is extremely important to my initial thinking about how it's going to go. And a lot of thinking takes place before word 1 goes down on the page.
Especially for poets, right? The editing comes in the process of reading the poem out loud to an audience. And if you're familiar with some of my work, the poems in the book, in the page, are not the same as the poems I recite, yeah? Because they've transformed over many, many, many readings.
But even with prose, the best way to edit is to read aloud, to read aloud the sentences that you've written and to hear where you stumble, where you don't understand what you're reading. You know, the spoken voice can tell you things that even just if you're only the audience yourself,
Totally agree.
that the reading person can't.
I read other people's poetry out loud. at home by myself. Sometimes, if people come over, I'll say, here, listen to this poem. I like reading poetry aloud, and I feel like it teaches me how to listen.
And I would add that all poetry should be read out loud. Poetry is an oral art, and the poet should solve the questions of that art. But I also feel very strongly about reading poems to your friends and having your friends read you poems.
I hand copy other people's writings just to see how writers, I hand copy passage from War and Peace just to see how Tolstoy gets those words down. Yeah.
As much as we think of ourselves as good readers, we don't really do that. But having to type each individual letter and space and punctuation mark, you see it in a completely different, almost craft-driven way.
I think reading to your lover is one of the sexiest things you can do. The best writing for me, when I feel really excited about it, is when I've written something down that surprises me.
When I talk about structure, I'm thinking about how you treat time in the novel, because you already know the story, you already know the plot. Those are not the structure, but how you treat the time. That's important to know beforehand.
Confronting that problem of time in this novel, I just kind of finished, I think. I solved it by eliminating references to specific time. Yeah? So that you can't really tell whether a month has gone by, maybe a few days, how long ago something happened. And I find that for this particular work, I think it's effective in that.
It's very healthy not to care that much that you're not making a dent on large numbers of people. And the writers that Yiyun cited, Chekhov and Tolstoy and all, or even farther back, they didn't have huge, overwhelming numbers of readers in their own lifetime. They accumulate readers as they go along.
Being a writer, despite the fact that most of the community ignores you, for me, that's sort of a blessing, really. I don't want people to pay attention to what I'm doing. If I wanted to be a public figure all the time, I would be an actor or something. I'm a writer. I'm doing it, in my pajamas.